And so we are about to begin our session, and we will be moving according to our agenda. Good afternoon, dear participants and guests. My name is Andrii HALAI. I work in the Penitentiary Academy of Ukraine, and I deal with the scientific researchers. And I assist in this very regards to conduct this scientific conference that we have organized today. It is very much interesting for us to listen to the about the foreign and Ukrainian experiences, to discuss the vision of the modern jail system, and also to exchange those innovations that our participants will be able to tell us. All of our participants today are very much interesting because it's one of four of our panel discussions today, and at it, all of our partners and colleagues and friends from all foreign countries, and these are highly regarded guests and experts who are deeply into the topic of jail innovations and development, the implementation of the modern approaches to the tendency of activity of penitentiary systems. And before we start and mentioning about all the measures done in Ukraine, we'd like to say that we are so much thankful to the Defense Forces of Ukraine, due to who we have a possibility right now to sit in here and to conduct such an interesting event, and to be able to introduce our interesting guests. And thank you for understanding, thank you for supporting Ukraine. We know that you do that, and we are so much thankful for you for that. The introduction of our session, I will not be doing that, since it is better to simply introduce each of the participants upon their speech delivery. And for each of the speech, we will have approximately 20 minutes. And I will be so much thankful if we will manage to both listen to our participants and to do a round of discussions, to set up some questions for them. I am happy that the language barrier will not be an obstacle today. And I invite our participants today and both the listeners today to be actively engaged and to ask questions, and also to use the chat for this option. Perhaps this might be more comfortable for all of us for moderation, if you happen to use it. And all the questions that, and also let me elaborate a little bit about the presentations. If I understand this correct, we already have a possibility to share your screens and monitors, at least from those who have the presentations to see, to depict. I think you will be doing that by yourself. And those presentations for the others, who don't have such possibility, just tell it to us and we will be switching the slides upon your request, if it's going to be easier and more convenient for you. By now, I think that all the organizational and arrangement things I have announced, and I think that we will start. And for the first floor, I'd like to invite Mr. Pedro des NEVES, who we know for a long time, and we know the work series of his organization's innovative prison systems. We have been attending lots of events as a guest, and we hope to be there as the participants of your project in the future. And you are the innovators in terms of the safe environment in the modern environment. So, Mr. Pedro, please, the floor is yours, and he will be talking about ensuring secure correctional environments through prison digitalization. Please, floor is yours.
Good morning to you all. So I hope you can hear me well. I'm just sharing my screen. Just a second. Okay, let me see. Can you please confirm if you see the full screen being shared? Yeah. Okay. So, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me in this very interesting session. I was expecting not to be the first presenting, so that somebody else could set the floor and talk a little bit about the topics that bring us here today, about how to create and how to maintain modern penitentiary systems. I'll be focusing on a specific aspect, which can be, on the one hand, a supporter of modern penitentiary systems, but also a driver of modernization, that is technology. So we can look at technology as a tool, as an instrument to support our own practice, but we can also see technology, especially digital technologies, to be a driver of modernization as well. So I'll try to address that in a little bit. I would like to start by saying that we do have different constraints in the context where you operate, that we cannot, in our own contexts, in our own realities that we experience both in Europe, in North America, or even in South America, that we cannot even imagine. So correctional services, by definition, and I would say by definition, unfortunately, do normally face constraints in terms of resources, are not typically the priority in terms of budgets and the government budgets. So this is a fact in many jurisdictions. But we cannot imagine, from our standpoint and from where we talk at the moment, we cannot imagine how it is to manage prison service in times of war or in a conflict situation. So this is a very very different situation, of course, the one you are experiencing than the one that we are used to face. And from our standpoint and from what we see, it's the situation that is already very, very complex. It becomes much more complex in that context. So, of course, there might be concerns. There might be, of course, during a conflict, there might be security concerns that we need to address. There might be the fear of an overreaction or the use of force. Due to latent fear of violence or rebellion, so the situation it becomes more tense than just in a common situation. There might be lockdowns and restrictions of movements. That means that we may have to reduce the access of inmates to basic services, to programs, sometimes to essential services, or even this could be social services, legal access, or medical care. This could be real constraints. There might be the risk of escapes that we need to face, but there are also operational constraints, so staff shortages, and we've seen that in different areas of conflict where we have operated. That might be shortages of staff. There might be breakdowns in the routines, in the operational routines or the schedules of the prisons. There might be disruptions due to the disruption of logistics and supplies, for instance. But there are also aspects that refer to legal and human constraints. So sometimes during a conflict, we have the suppression or the delay of legal processes. And this is, of course, a main concern because court appearances may become delayed. Parole hearings or hearings with judges to decide on early release. These can be delayed as well. Inmate transfers can be delayed as well. There's a risk of right violations, a difficulty to ensure transparency and external oversight. And I think we'll have also a presentation that will touch on that. But there will be many other constraints related to health, to sanitation, to communication and information, lack of communication with families or legal representatives, failure to communicate also sometimes with staff. So we do, that's the way I see it from our point of view, as well of all the different resource constraints that may exist, so insufficient funding, even for emergencies, and more a highly dependence on external actors, so to be able to perform the function that we need to perform at correctional services. So technology, as I mentioned, can be both an enabler in the or can support our operations, our business, or can be really a driver of modernization. And I tend to see it both in these two aspects: one supporting daily operations, the other one being a driver of modernization through digitization of a correctional service. That's very much how different correctional services are looking at it from different perspectives as well throughout the world. So typically, when we talk about technology, and my presentation is a little bit about technology, we tend to look to different sides, and we have this screen. It has different colors. You know, it has a sort of salmon color background and a white color background. So the background part of the screen is related to all the technologies that or to some of the technologies that are more related to security. So we need to ensure that prisons are secure and safe environments. This is important, of course, not only for the inmates, but also for the staff that works in prisons, for the volunteers that come and work in our prisons, for teachers, for instructors, for religious staff that comes in. So we need to ensure the security and, of course, to execute the mandate of keeping society safe. So this is very important. It's very difficult to think about rehabilitation of inmates to deploy activities and programs if we are not able to have a secure facility and a safe facility, both for the inmates or the people that work inside the prisons. So on that side, with the Salman background, we would look mainly to these technologies that ensure security. So we're mainly talking about some of them are very traditional and they have been around for a long time, like intelligent CCTV systems or CCTV systems nowadays becoming more and more intelligent and allowing us to do much more things than they used to. Scanning and detection of drugs or illicit substances that may come into the prisons, or illicit objects or devices that we know that may pose a risk to the security of the prisons. We may be talking about biometrics and different devices that allows us to identify if that person is really the person that is authorized or that is permitted to be in a certain place, for instance. We can talk about the use of drones for security as well. Not only we often see drones as a risk to prisons because they are used to transport. They may be used to transport illicit goods, so being substances, devices, or even put a higher risk in terms of a threat of attack, for instance, for different facilities. But we can also use drones for surveillance. We can use drones for surveillance in open spaces where we allow inmates to do work outdoors. So this is also of course, very important. In some jurisdictions, we talk about jamming and detection of communications to avoid illegal communications. So that's very much, and then of course we have on the downside, we have some more intelligent intelligent systems and control systems. So we could have, using an intelligent CCTV system, we can have a pattern recognition, not just the identification of a person, but the identification of a certain behavior. So if we have a sudden movement of a number of inmates trying to attack another individual, so that we get an alert, we get an alarm, so that we can act easy. We look at command and control centers where we can monitor the different situation inside prisons, and we look at mobile devices that officers can use, not just to report situations, but also to have access to data about the different situations that occur inside the prisons. On the other hand side, on the white side, we are mainly looking at what we call the reinsertion-led systems. So on one side, we're looking at security. On the other side, we're looking at, okay, so what about these systems that support reinsertion? One of them is very old, and we typically look at the telephone. You know, the telephone has been around for a long time. And we know how important it is for communication of inmates with their families, for communication with inmates with their significant ones, and how this connection of an inmate with the family, with the significant ones, plays an important role in the reinsertion of this individual when he serves his sentence or her sentence. So the phone becomes, a very old technology but is a crucial technology in terms of communication. Of course, we cannot just let alone a phone inside prison that is not controlled, especially that may be in a conflict situation or it may be in any other situation. And the reason for that is that we do face situations of organized crime. We know that there is contraband entering prisons. So we need to have secure ways of communication, not forbidding the communication, but having secure ways of communication, of allowing inmates to communicate with their families, with their beloved ones, and how important that is. So here, basically, on the right side, we are looking at how do we normalize an environment that is not normal. And this is always very difficult. Prison is not a normal environment. So we are trying to bring some technology that allows for individuals to have at least some sense of normality. Communication is part of it. The other one is related to learning, and the use of e-learning or distance learning is has an important role nowadays as well. So aside of classroom training and classroom education, so having e-learning is, of course, a very important aspect. The use of virtual reality, for instance, and we have been doing that in different jurisdictions in Europe and also outside of Europe, the use of virtual reality to work with inmates, not only on behavioral change, but also to give them an idea of potential professions that they could work when they leave prisons, especially when we're talking about younger inmates or people that have never had a work experience and so on. So we do use virtual reality for that. On this side of technology, we could also look at technologies that allows us to grant the rights of individuals to have access to justice, for instance. So in a conflict, in periods of conflict, but also during a pandemic like the one we had not so long ago, the use of virtual court hearings became normal. And they became normal because we had the constraints of movements of people. So the use of video conferences to support court hearings became normal, as the use of e-health or electronic health or telehealth became normal as a way, in some jurisdictions, as a way to give more access to health, to a basic service to inmates that sometimes it's difficult to provide because we don't have all the professionals, all the specialities inside the prison facility. So we are not talking here about replacing the human contact. We are not talking here about replacing the doctors and nurses that we need to have in prison, but we are talking about providing some sort of service that complements the services that we already have. Aside of that, we could talk about other technologies that provide self-service to inmates, like having access to their own judicial file, to have access to their own agenda inside the prison, to have access to contact with their families through an electronic letter, for instance, using a kiosk or a mobile device, and so on. So these are two sides of and two very important sides of the use of technology inside correctional service. But the key aspect and the central element of this picture that we have here, it's not so much on the security side or on the research side, is mostly on the intersection between these two. And that's what that the system that should be in place in every jurisdiction, regardless of how poor it is, how difficult it is to manage the system, which is the offender management system, very often called also as the prison or penitentiary management system. This is the system that basically is able to collect all the data of all the inmates, as it can be their biographic data, it could be their health data, it could be their reinsertion data, so the engagement in learning and training and work activities. It collects the data of the privileges that the individual may have. It collects the data of the sentence, so that we know when the individual is able to go out on an early release, or when he's eligible to an early release, or even when he's finishing his sentence. So this is not so obvious in many jurisdictions where we have worked. We have people service sentences for longer than they should, because they don't have these kind of systems in place, or they are not accurate enough. So the offender management system becomes, in fact, the key system of any correctional service. And it must be a system that gathers data from other systems like the ones I was referring to. So just summarizing what we talked here, and I think Andrii will tell me to finish in a minute. So I will just finish. So we may use, and we are using, different technologies like real-time location technologies to know who is where, who is coming through where, and who is doing what, using intelligent CCTV, the use of biometrics. Some countries are using radio frequency wristbands to identify the location of individuals inside a facility. And this allows a lot of the prison automation as well, so that we can create secure environments. We are using also the devices to help staff to have access to data, inmate data, and security data. We are using technology to take individuals out of prisons as well, using electronic monitoring, reducing the pressure that we have inside prisons, and taking to the community individuals that do not need to be incarcerated, but still need to be monitored due to the crime they've committed or the risk they may still present to some victims. And we use it a lot in cases of domestic violence, or even in other cases. So the use of electronic bracelets, that you are aware, is of course key. Using technologies for contraband detection, so to detect drugs, cell phones, weapons, and so on. So we may be talking about traditional X-ray scanners or body scanners in many situations as well. Creating enlarging the availability of communication opportunities of inmates with their families through secure and monitored systems. This is very important as well. But we know how important communication is to ensure the reintegration of these individuals and to reduce recidivism. But also creating opportunities to enlarge the possibility of inmates to have access to services, sometimes when it's very difficult to provide those services. And this could be access to justice through virtual court hearings, or the use of telehealth or video conferencing for communication with doctors. The use of video calls, which is becoming very common in many jurisdictions, so that inmates can may have contact with their families. Drone detection and countermeasures, but also the use of drones for surveillance, not just to put them down. The use of command and control systems, so that we can integrate the different systems inside prisons. And at last but not least, what I mentioned before, offender management system, which is basically the neurological system that should be it said that it should exist in every jurisdiction, and that should integrate data regarding an individual's biographics, security, visitation, sentence, case management, and including their education, training, and labor. grievances and requests of an individual while during the duration of the sentence. Even some aspects of prison intelligence when we are dealing with extremist groups, extremist individuals, or with organized crime, aspects related to management of the facility itself. So this is, in fact, the key system that needs to exist in every jurisdiction, and that should be a modern one to exist. And then, of course, we also have data systems that allows us to analyze this data that we've collected and use it in the way to ensure security. So the big challenge, here is not about it's not technology, but it's mostly how do we use technology in prison facilities. So how do we want to use technology as an instrument to support reintegration and to support rehabilitation of an individual? I gave you an example of the use of e-learning, the use of virtual reality, but we can talk about many others, and the support of reintegration through the family, the nurturing family links and communications. So, but also while keeping the traditional function of control and security that is key, so that we can really work with these individuals in an institutional setting. So we need to think about how to balance these interests, and that very often are in conflict, so that we can implement different technologies. So this was my short presentation on the topic. I'm available, of course, for different conversations afterwards around it, or you have any questions, but I leave it now to Andrii to proceed. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Pedro. It was quite interesting to listen to and to look at your presentation. And in order to discuss the questions of different digital technologies that cover different sides of livability in the penitentiary systems, one has to deeply be in the topic and to know to talk as peer-to-peer, professional to professional. In Ukraine, the question of digitalization and other technologies that have been used on a more ground level. And that elephant that you have, unfortunately we do not have enough those balls that will be able to carry him or her out. But I will be happy if among the participants will be any kind of questions to you, and I kindly ask to address the questions both in the chat as well as raising the hand in the Zoom. When you have this option, it will give us a hint that you want to address a question. Back in my turn, I'd like to say that at the beginning you said that it would be great for somebody to do this kind of system with the risks of during wartime. I'd like to give you a small feedback. I don't know from where in Portugal you know the details about the complexities of the penitentiary system or how it works during wartime, but I'm sure that you know it quite well, and you have pretty nicely discussed those risks that we are facing. And unfortunately, the only country in Ukraine in the world right now and has a penitentiary system that is trying to still be working and coordinate with other entities. I will also add up a little bit in terms of show you the specifics of this topic. If, as you have said it, during war times, indeed, it makes it more complicated. The most standard processes that are there in the penitentiary system, say, the question of the communication with near and dear ones, due to the fact that they can already be remotely, and it is not that easy to come to them easily and to communicate with establishments. And also, there is a couple of more lines of work appear that one has to urgently integrate, and this is very much important to integrate them. That is the energy preservation, water provision, and the security, say, during bombardment, and the bombardment of that kind of intensity that we have in Ukraine, and that one has to urgently implement, and the intensity and the complexity of all these processes, so to say, if during peacetime the workers of the jail work 100% out of their productivity, but in the jails that function under martial law and during war times, one has to work 130%, even more, meaning that the intensity and the complexity of war, in terms of the number of the procedures and operations to do, one has to increase them. And without it, the system will be simply disassembled and be turned into something uncontrolled. And in addition to that, there is a moral exhaust, the psychological complexities, and all elements of emotional and physical exhaustment. Yes, the existing system of Ukraine is still up and running in Ukraine, and we are thankful to all the structures who either help us or stand together with us. And unfortunately, we have such a situation that we have to deal with this. Because if others, law enforcement structures, they are responsible during war times only for themselves, but the jails during wartime, they are responsible for themselves and for those people who they have underneath themselves, meaning our cons and the convicted people about the life and health of who we still have to take care of. So this was a quick feedback and entrance into the topic of how the jail system in Ukraine works. But since we have been talking about control mechanisms and the modern technologies that are there in the jails, can you please elaborate, colleagues and participants? Do you happen to have any questions? I see that there is a question in the chat, and if I may, I will read it out loud. To what extent is the implementation of digitalization in the penitentiary system complex? And how do you see, and are the different, will it be okay to say that these kind of systems are much more complicated to implement than during the regular usual times?
Well, definitely. I mean, depending on the type of IT system that we are implementing in a correctional service, of course, it can be much more complex than others. I give you a couple of examples from the simplest one, who still needs investment and effort, to the most complex ones that we can see. I'll give you a couple of examples. So first one, which is typically easier to implement, is what we were talking about the use of phones or video calls inside prisons, right? Basically, we're talking about adopting a system that exists in many other jurisdictions, where you can have access to a phone, which is a quite simple technology that everybody knows how to use, might require some infrastructure investments, both from the state or from a private partner, as it typically occurs in Europe. But it's a quite easy technology to implement, so that's not so problematic. When we move to other types of technology, especially the ones that not relate to inmates but relate to staff or relate to the management of the organization, the implementation of these technologies become more complex. So giving you the example of the implementation of offender management systems and the way we've seen them in Europe and in the US or in other jurisdictions, the larger and the more complex are, of course, the operations, and the larger is the scope of the system, the more complex it becomes to implement. Not because of technology itself, but because of the difficulty that we typically have to have users to adopt the technology. So give you an example. If we implement an offender management system, if the system is only looking at supporting one aspect of offender management and having if it's an inmate database, it's quite simple to implement from a technology perspective, and the adoption, it's normally quite fast as well. So it's not so difficult. As we start to bring prison operations to be supported by the digital tools. Let's give you the example of movements of inmates, or recording everything that happens through rehabilitation activities, or even the health, recording everything that happens in the health context. Or if we need to integrate with third parties, like if we need to integrate the system with the court system or with the police system, with the prosecutor's office, and so on and so on. So the complexity becomes higher. So it may be higher from a technology perspective because we need to integrate with third parties, and we may it may require more time and investment, but also more importantly from a perspective of the change management and the adoption of technology by the users. And this is very important. So the design of these systems and the implementation of these systems must be done together with the users, with the correctional officers must be involved. Prison wardens or prison governors must be involved. Different stakeholders must be involved if we want these projects to be successful. So there are two levels of complexity. I would put them three. One of them is regarding the investments that may be required. The second is regarding the infrastructure that may need to be put in place for these systems to operate. We may be talking about cabling, internet access, and so on, because we're talking about digital services. And the third one, which is for me the most important one, is really the involvement of the different key stakeholders. And by those, I say everyone that works in a correctional setting that is going to be the final user of the system. Most projects fail not because the technology is not good, but because the users reject or do not adopt the technology that will support their operation. Sometimes because they don't understand it, sometimes because they don't feel the need for it. There might be differences. Resistance is typical of human nature to especially to new technologies and new ways of doing things in a labor in a work context. So this is something that we need to take into account. So it's not just technology. It's the technology, but what we typically would call the human factor, the organizational culture, and that needs to be worked as well when we are implementing more complex systems.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Pedro, for enlarging and for this very much deep answer to these questions. I completely agree with you. For example, in Ukraine, I clearly see some mistakes that were done upon the very weak engagement of the final beneficiaries and the users of those registers of recordings of inmates as a pretty good system, as well as keeping track of the inmate records, private records. And the fact that we are correcting these mistakes right now is because at the very first stage we were not involved, or they did not invite us, or when we say we were quite passive when this very system was implemented. Back at the time I was not working. I can't tell you the exact reasons, but its consequences we still can see them, and we face them. On a separate note, I'd like to say that it is really nice that we have quite a pretty intensive discussion both alive and in our web chat. And I would like to jump on this opportunity to say thank you to Mr. Rait, who is also providing the advices in the chat when it comes to digitalization. And we are happy to cooperate with your system, and we exchange a lot from you. And I hope that you exchange a lot from us too, because they also have the question of very big proximity to one country that so much loves to use weapon systems as a threatening technology. And I also would like to move on with our discussion, but I take a look at the time and I have to moderate and keep on moderating our process for the ensuring that the process moves on, because because this 2.5 hours discussion can be turned into a 6-hour discussion. That is why, thank you so much, Mr. Pedro, for your interesting presentation. If you don't mind, we will still be contacting you if you allow us to adapt and to use your perfect presentation. And I'm sure that we will be able to use it in a very qualitative way.
Andrii, I just shared my presentation in the chat, and I also shared my email, so feel free to get in touch. Okay. And it's been a pleasure to see you and to see some very good colleagues in this session as well. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you so much too. I'd like to give the floor now Mr. Marc NèVE, the president of the Central Supervisory Board of Prisons in Belgium. If I understand it correct, and I will ask Marc to explain the whole idea of his profession. As I understand, this is kind of in one of the, so you're one of the jail ombudsmen who works in Belgium. If I'm wrong, please, Mr. Marc, can you elaborate on this?
It's right. I'm at the head of the Prison Monitoring Council. But first of all, before to say some words about our work, let me express our solidarity with the Ukrainian people. Like our other European neighbors, we are deeply concerned by the aggression that Ukraine is facing today. And that said, thank you for inviting me to present our institution, established 5 years ago, Central Prison Monitoring Council, which I have the honor to chairing. To begin with, let's take a step back. External oversight of prisons is not a new concept in Belgium. The establishment of administrative commissions composed of external members dates back to the 19th century, with the aim of monitoring the situation of individuals deprived of their liberty. This external oversight system was expanded in 1920 with the creation of the High Prison Council, an advisory board on prison policy. Both the administrative commissions and the Higher Prison Council were later governed by a royal decree of May 1965, which set out the general regulations for prison establishments. As part of the work of a parliamentary commission set up at the end of the 19th and which led to the adoption of the Basic Law adopted in January 2005 on prison administration and the legal status of detainees, lawmakers began a reform of the administrative commissions and, more broadly, the prison oversight system. This reform was motivated by the importance of having external and independent monitoring seen as a necessary condition for safeguarding the rights of detainees in a context characterized on the one hand by a severe lack of freedom and great dependence of detainees, and on the other hand by the organizational structure of prisons where individual legal interests come second to those of the institution and where peace, order and security are prioritized. However, before this basic law came into effect, in the years following the vote on the basic law in 2005, which forms the basis of our operations, it took several more initiatives to achieve the legislative changes needed to ensure that both Central Council and the monitoring commissions were removed from the jurisdiction of the Minister of Justice, both legally and in terms of administration and finance. Today, the oversight bodies have a legal foundation and have gained independence, as they now report to the Parliament instead of the Minister of Justice. The Central Monitoring Council, as an independent and impartial oversight and advisory body, works to ensure the rights of and human dignity of detainees. It receives an annual budget allocation from the Parliament. Monitoring commissions are established at each of the country's 38 prison facilities. They are responsible for independently overseeing prison conditions, how detainees are treated, and whether their rights are respected. The basic law outlines the responsibilities of the Central Prison Monitoring Council and the local monitoring commissions. For the Central Council, first of all, it's carry out independent oversight of prisons, the treatment of detainees, and compliance with the rules that apply to them. Secondly, submit opinions either on its own initiative or at the request of the Parliament, the Minister of Justice, or the Minister responsible for prison healthcare, regarding the administration of prison facilities and the execution of custodial sentences and measures. Thirdly, establish monitoring commissions at each prison facility and provide them with support, coordination, and oversight of their operations. And finally, draft an annual report to the House of Representatives, the Minister of Justice, and the Minister responsible for prison healthcare. For the monitoring commissions, it's first of all independently oversee the prison to which they are assigned, including the treatment of detainees and compliance with applicable rules. Secondly, provide the Central Council, either proactively or upon request, with opinions and information on matters within the prisons that are directly or indirectly related to detainee well-being and make recommendations they consider appropriate. Thirdly, serve as mediators between the prison director and detainees for issues through their attentions. And finally, prepare an annual report. In April 2019, the new Central Prison Monitoring Council, whose members were each appointed by Parliament with a 2/3 majority, was officially sworn in before the President of the Parliament. The Central Council is expected to play a key role in safeguarding human rights in prison settings, and it intends to take on that role with determination. In terms of oversight, the Council aims to develop a credible and effective method for conducting prison, both by its own members and by the 500 members of the local monitoring commissions. Through frequent visits and in-depth longitudinal and/or cross-sectional research in all prisons, the Central Council intends to continually build its expertise. For example, our latest report deals with mental health in prisons. 5 different establishments were visited on the basis of the 5 visits reports. A 6th summary report has been drafted containing our main recommendations. Additionally, through well-founded opinions, the Council aims to influence and help ensure, promote, and protect the rights and dignity of incarcerated individuals. The Central Council also wants to have an impact on prison policy more broadly. For example, just a few weeks ago, we issued an opinion on prison regulation. In a few words, the project aims to maintain a balance between the number of prison entries and the number of releases to avoid increasing prison capacity at all costs. Experience teaches that the greater the capacity, the greater the overcrowding. Regarding the right to file complaints, the Central Council is committed to ensuring that detainees can exercise this right effectively and will make sure that this mission remains independent from its monitoring one. To this end, we have developed and set up a complaints commission within each monitoring commission responsible for adjudicating complaints lodged by inmates. The decisions of the complaints committee can lead to the annulment of a director's decision and the granting of non-financial compensation. An appeal against these decisions is also possible, and at the end we have to organize this right of complaint inspired by the law of our Dutch neighbors. It's for the moment in full expansion. From a general point of view, the Central Council believes that in critical, constructive and transparent collaboration with the General Directorate of Penitentiary Facilities and with the competent ministers, namely the Minister of Justice and the Minister responsible for prison healthcare. Furthermore, the Central Council seeks to use its unique position to bring together various stakeholders, legislative, executive, and judicial bodies, the healthcare sector, academia, civil society organizations, other national independent institutions, and international bodies such as the CPT, UN, and so on. In doing so, the Central Council aims to contribute to the development of a new approach to detention and prison policy and to help foster public openness to such a shift within society. External oversight of the provision of liberty is a democratic necessity. This requirement has been enshrined in the law. It's equally essential that the work carried out under this mandate be accessible to all. This means that all our work, including all decisions of the right of complaint, can be accessed via our website. This publicity characterizes our societal role. Challenges, yes, they are permanent ones. First of all, independence from the executive. Secondly, availability of the necessary budget. Thirdly, the quality and credibility of our investigative work. And finally, communicating on our societal role. So, in a few words, that's the main challenges we have to face to, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Marc. It was pretty interesting to listen to you, and it is always important for the representatives of the penitentiary system to have the contacts and to be able to see the vision of their external observators from the external sector. And if you pay attention, I will tell you that at our conference we didn't invite, but at some point we don't have neither the representatives of Ukrainian ombudsman, even though at the previous centers there were the representatives of the another organization. That is why it is always pleasant to have a possibility to talk to Belgium ombudsman. So the first question, if I may, I will ask this one. I have been working quite actively and continue to work with the rights of the convicts. And since ombudsman has a big importance and impact on these processes, it is important for me to compare the lines of work and the ways of impact. Can you please elaborate? Can you give us any kind of 3 examples to compare with the activity of Ukrainian ombudsman that you clearly remember, say, from the previous year, when your institution helped to protect or to realize the rights of the precise convict or a group of convicts, simply for us to understand what risks are there regarding the rights in the jails that you control and in our case.
I think one of the most interesting initiatives, and it's the most recent one, is the right of complaint. Because by the right of complaint, there is a possibility to change the decisions of a director. So in comparison with the the ombudsman has a mediator role, but now with the right of complaint coming from the Netherlands, it's different. It's more, how can I say, you can have a real decision concerning the policy. For example, about isolation. It's possible to get a decision who make it to come back to a normal situation and to abandon the isolation, which you can't have it with a mediator. I hope that is clear enough.
Right, thank you. If you may, can you show us some precise examples? You say that you did a different monitoring. What kind of law disobeying or unlawful acts do you recall during those monitor missions of the prisons, I mean?
But for example, situation of like the decision of the prison direction to isolate somebody, it can be changed by the complaint commissions, and I think it's a judicial decision. It's not through a mediation that you can join, you can get it.
As I take it, there is a question about what kind of ways of connections with your network or organizations with the general directorate of the jail is there. What precisely means of convicts with you? How can convicts address to you for you to find out about their rights disobeying?
I don't understand exactly what you mean, because the way for the detainees to get access to the complaint commission is very easy.
Well, it's not my question, but the question from the chat. I'm simply trying to mediate it. And
Okay.
let us do it this way. I will ask you this way. Statistically, it is easier to address to you for the convicts to deliver their complaint to you. Statistically, what are the most popular channels of addressing to you? Say emails or a physical letter to send, or say the representatives of the establishment go to you. What are the ways of delivering the information about the rights of convicts disobeying do you practice?
In most of prisons, there is possibility to have an application and to have a digital communication with the complaint commission. But it's also possible to send a letter, or, for example, to ask the family to do it with you, with us. It's also regular, and we have many cases where, for example, the woman of a detainee send us a question or a complaint directly.
Well, same in Ukraine, we pay much attention to Ukrainian jail system because we represent this system, and through the different channels of complaints. And I know that we still have a long way ahead to work through the many different channels and possibilities that we created for them to work properly. Because unfortunately, there is this kind of element when there is a tradition of the representatives of the separate jails representatives to say that if people complain not to them but to somebody else, that this is a very bad thing. So we are trying to combat it, and I think that this kind of problem also exists in other in other countries, and this kind of right for complaint is something that we also have to work upon. Great, thanks to you, Mr. Marc. If you don't mind, we will be coming to our next speaker, and our next speaker is Cătălin OLARU. It will be pleasant for us also to see him, and I guess it's been a year or even more when we haven't seen each other. But I think that out of those Eastern European countries, it seems to me the Romanian system of the penitentiary system has achieved a big achievement, especially during the last period of time. And it will be interesting for us to listen to what Mr. Cătălin can tell about the challenges that Romanian penitentiary system is facing. So please, the floor is yours.
Hello, Mr. HALAI. Indeed, almost a year passed since you last visited us. It was a pleasure having you here. I will try to share my screen, and will you please let me know if it works? Yeah. Okay. So thank you again for this opportunity to present one of the biggest challenges in Romania. I will start with a short presentation of the penitentiary system, so everybody can understand even the similarities between us and the Ukrainian prison system. So in Romania, there are 44 penitentiaries spread around the country. The Romanian prison system started a reform just after 1989, when the communism regime fell. And I can say that I've seen lots of the prisons in Romania. We don't have two similar prisons, because all have different infrastructure, different type of construction. There are buildings that were repurposed out of military barracks or different industrial sites. And on the way, we are about to build two new prisons in Berceni and Unguriu. Some trends. The prison population in Romania is on a rise since 2020. And now we've reached more than 24,500 inmates. That's today's numbers. As you can see, the trend is going higher and higher. And as I said, we are building two new prisons. The two prisons will have 1,900 new places. But if we continue with this trend, they are filled before they're built, because the difference between prisoners entering the prison system last year in January and those leaving the system, it's a plus 1,200 in 1 year. And I hope this trend does not go ahead in the following years, because for sure a new reform is needed. In the Romanian prison system, we have progressive or regressive detention regimes. There are four. There's the maximum security. Then we have the closed regime, the semi-open regime, and the open regime. As you can see, most of the inmates are in semi-open regime. These are inmates with sentences more than 3 years, but less than 15. We also have the remand sections in the prisons. Also, in Romania, we have detention centers for minors. For those under 18, they're called education centers, and those between 18 and 21, detention centers. As you see, we have quite a lot. The numbers are quite high lately. So we are managing this prison system with 12,900 staff. But the standards were calculated, I think, 2 years ago. It was 16,000 per standard. But last year, they have recalculated and adjusted it to the new trends. And we would need 20,000 staff members. And there's no chance right now to do that. As you know, Romania has financial sort of crisis, big deficit. I think it's over 9% of the gross internal budget. Of course, we have the reintegration activities and the recidivism rate that we've calculated of lately. In 2024, it was 37% that come back to prisons. In Romania, prisoners also have the right to work. So if they're not in school, they will work, but they don't have to. They also receive money, so 40% of what they earn is given to them in their accounts. Okay, let's go to the challenge that I wanted to talk to you today, and going to the European Courts of Human Rights pilot decision. I wanted to tackle this issue because when you have a pilot decision from the European Court of Human Rights, that means you have a problem in the system. So you have a systematic problem. And this we had to address. So these are the two cases. And you can see an image of overcrowding since I think it was taken in 2010. So this is how Romanian prison cells looked in 2010. Okay, so the government realized as well that we do need to do something about the overcrowding. And because of the pilot decision of the European Court of Human Rights, the government approved an action plan for 5 years, but it will be extended. The plan was to build almost 8,000 new prison spaces and to modernize around 1,000. So what we did, we need to find funding sources because through building prisons costs a lot. So the first one was the Council of Europe Development Bank, which gave Romania a loan of 170 million euros to build the 2 new prisons I just mentioned, in Unguriu and Berceni. Also, our friends from Norway, the Norway grants are one of the few grants that allow us to build infrastructure, but it's a percentage out of the whole grant. You can spend 60% on infrastructure, 40% on self-measure and reforms. And the other is the state budget, of course. Money were allocated for that. And then we just found the sources, we had the idea, and then the COVID pandemic hits and the war in Ukraine that you guys are now going through. Afterwards, the building costs raised 2 times, 3 times, even 4 times for the buildings. We had to hold all the procurement procedures because we had to redistribute money, prioritize investment objectives, to build only the things that we really needed. Also, staff training, which were supposed moved online. It was not that effective because it should have been a hands-on training of staff. So we managed. We went through it. We got the priorities right. So we got to build a new detention section. Here you have the largest one, which was built under Norway grants. It's a 420 new places in Baia Mare Penitentiary. You can see the detention section, also a room. In the detention rooms, we do not have the possibility to do what our Norwegian friends do and have a unicellular room. So we have 6 persons in this room, respecting all the European prison conditions. So it's 4 square meters with internal bathroom and shower. And down to the right, you can see multifunctional pavilion. So here, I don't know in Ukraine if the probation and the prison are under the same administration. In Romania, prison is its own administration under the Ministry of Justice, and the probation, it's another department under the Ministry of Justice, but not under the same governor or director. Let's put it like that. So we decided under NEVE grants to build multifunctional pavilions. There, the probation colleagues will come and have their offices, and together with our prison officers, reintegration staff, we will have common activities for inmates to have a seamless transition to their release. So this was built to implement the seamless principle. That means an easy transition from prison to probation, or from prison to the normal life. This is another one of the units. We had 4 units. We had to discard one of them. This is also newly built. It's a 210 detention section. And these are smaller ones. In Craiova, we built the first women detention section in 60 years. So it's dedicated only to women. It's an 84 places detention section. The one in Port Alba, it's 80 places detention section, and all apply the principle of normality. So we want life in those sections to be as close to life outside. So all the inmates have to, which are custodied there, have either to go to school or go to work. So they will have like a regular schedule, like any normal person, wake up in the morning, go to work or go to school, and come back in the evening, have leisure time, talk to our psychologists, educators. And the other one, the one below, it's a juvenile detention section, which was renovated. 107 new places, I think. 107 places that were renovated and created better conditions for juveniles. The other 2 are the ones I told you before. The Council of Europe Development Bank loan, Unguriu and Bercen prison. But what we did, and we were talking about challenges. So the challenge is that now we have finished building those prisons. The challenge is we don't have enough stuff to send to those places, because some of them are like big prisons. The section with 420 inmates, it's bigger than the actual prison right now in Baia Mare. They have 360 inmates, and the new one is 420 inmates. So, and it's not only about the new buildings, because what we did, like I said before, under NEVE grants, you have 60% for investment and 40% for reforms. But reforms means staff. So during the implementation of all our projects, we had more than 500 staff trained, and this time we wanted to do one thing. We wanted to send not only those who are on the top level. We did that. We sent top management to training and job shadowing in Norway. So we had prison governors going and job shadowing a prison governor in Norway. We also sent middle management, because they are the closer ones to taking decisions in prison. But most important, and I emphasize this, we took the frontliners to do the job shadowing and go to Norway. They went to Poland, and they went to Lithuania to learn from their colleagues. And I must say that is a win. I know time is short, so I will end with the quote one of my good friends, Kim Ekhaugen, who says, "It's not all about the bricks." So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present the challenge in the Romanian prison right now.
Thank you, Mr. Cătălin, for your presentation. For us and for Ukraine, it has just become even more clear because how big the experience of yours is, and that we still have lots of things to take from you, and while moving to European community, and we would like to wish to European community and Norway to process that help that they provide to those countries to make sure that they will be able to help us, and we will be happy to intake the expertise, advices, and the support during in the regards of what kind of steps we have to cover and in what traps not to step in to correctly reform our penitentiary system of Ukraine. I am sure that we are interested in seeing Romanian penitentiary system experience, and if somebody has any kind of questions to Mr. Cătălin about the Romanian penitentiary system, please, colleagues from online or for those offline here, right now you have a possibility if you want to address a question. Right, but a little bit, okay, good afternoon. Can you please elaborate? You said about the numbers of recidives, 37% approximately, that's reoffending. I mean, that's perhaps of those who come back to the prison. Can you please say during what time of this happened? What is the period of like after the release from the period? What period did you take into account to identify whether the person has stepped on the correct path or still coming back to recidives? So within what period, as a rule, after the liberation from the prison, this person comes back to the prison? Or as a clarifying question, how did you measure this 37% of recidives in Ukraine? Because in Ukraine right now, there is a discussion going on about the correct formula, how to use. What kind of formula did you use?
Okay, so the recidivism rate is calculated based on a 3-year after release. So we take into consideration if a person was released from the moment the person was released from prison or reoffended between those 3 years. So it's a 3-year recidivism calculus.
Any more questions? Yes, can you please elaborate? How does the society takes the ex-convicts? Is it easier for them to find a job, to become the lawful citizens again?
There is stigma in the society for inmates in the society as well. But what I can say about the people finding jobs after prison, it depends on the region of Romania. Some regions which are more economically rich, let's say like in the west part of Romania, they have the opportunity to send inmates to work since they are detained. So they will work for periods like 2 or 3 years, sometimes for the same company. And most of the companies who see them as good workers will hire them afterwards. So they can find a job straight from prison. But it does not happen in the entire Romania because there are poorer areas in Romania, in the eastern part, for example. It's not the easiest thing to do to find a job in Romania after release. But it happens. It happens. There are chances of them to be reinserted into society.
Thank you, Mr. Cătălin. Indeed, it's not possible to, within 2 minutes, answer the question of the reintegration. It's the same as complexity of the penitentiary system control management. So we are hoping for the further cooperation of Ukrainian side and the penitentiary system of Romania for the future cooperation and achieving those goals that this time set ahead of us. Thank you so much. All this session is about the challenges and only the challenges. And right now we're going to have another one. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Dorin MURESAN. And the idea is that Dorin has a co-author with who he will be delivering his speech, and also the time allocated for Mr. Dorin. He asked to provide a possibility to him for another representative to deliver a speech. And currently, as I understand, it's about ICPA as a very important structure that formulates and develops the prison systems. So as I take it, he is right now in Kazakhstan. That's why I will be happy if we will be able to make it on time, but this way or another we'll be happy to listen to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dorin MURESAN. I am the chair of the Staff Training and Development Network within ICPA. Together with me in the audience is my co-chair, Mr. Doug Dredke, and also as the other speaker, prison governor, former prison governor and university teacher, Batinas. So basically, initially it was supposed to have this presentation, me and Mr. Batinas, but then I think it was important for the audience to hear also the feedback of a recognized professional, a former director general of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, but also a university teacher of from US. My presentation, it's on Prezi. It's not a classical PowerPoint. I will try to go fast through this presentation because I would like to hear the voices, also the voices from the field, the opinion of former Director General of a prison system from US, and also a person who was deeply involved in the first mentoring program that was started in Romania in 2012, Mr. Governor Batinas. So, if it's possible, because my connectivity it's low here, please share the first slide to this presentation. Could you do it? Okay, so why we choose staff mentoring? Because we are working in an environment where our staff face an unlimited numbers of stress factors. So we are exposed to the stress. We are exposed to the burnout, also to high turnover. Let's face it that an important part of our human resources at each 20 or 25 years, it's replaced. Why it's important to deliver staff mentoring, to implement staff mentoring program? Nobody was born knowing everything. When we enter in a prison environment as a new recruits, we know what we were trained in our police academies or on our training schools. But in our training schools, we were trained on how to work with the middle of the road type of inmate, with an inmate that accept our request and do as we requested. But we all realize that in our environment, the things are not as the same. So we need to learn from those with more advanced professional experience. So it's about sharing the knowledge, the transfer of the knowledge. It's also about the emotional support. When you have 21 or 22 years and you are just entering a maximum security prison, well, there are some issues, there are some challenges that you need to face. And yes, you need some emotional support on that. And why it's more important, we are focused in our activity. We used to call that the main challenges for a prison system are to keep the prison secure and to prepare that and to prepare inmates for the rehabilitation. But my question is, who supports those who are involved in the process of rehabilitation? Who supports those who are working in the prison? Who supports the prison staff who is working in the prisons? Next slide, please. So imagine when we discuss a mentoring process, we identify a multifaceted approach. So the first one, it's about the proper mentoring, the proper matching between mentor and the mentees. Well, it will be good also to have a skill-based pairing. If I allocate as a mentor a young members of personnel with only 1 or 2 years of experience to an even new recruit, the process of mentoring will it will exist on paper, but in reality, the transfer of knowledge will not happen because that knowledge was limited also to the mentor and to the mentee. Then it's about how we develop modules on various topics, extremely important in the prison realities of our times. So it's about active listening, crisis management, ethical boundaries. These are issues that in the training facilities we are not delivering to our trainees, to our recruits. Active listening, crisis management, and ethical boundaries. How to organize and to develop the role-playing scenarios. I'm insisting on this topic because I just finished a training session for UNODC in Kazakhstan, where we are focusing on these topics for our trainees. Then, when we discuss about balancing act, the security and versus support, ensuring that during the mentoring program we are not compromising the institutional protocols. And I will ask at the end of our presentation for Mr. Governor Batinas to speak more about how we organize the formal and informal ways of these mentoring programs. So imagine that you are pairing a seasoned officer who survived a prison riot with a rookie terrified of their first shift. I will tell you from my personal experience, when I entered on my first days as a recently graduate of police academy, I was allocated to an officer who was experiencing a riot in one of the maximum security prisons in Romania in the early 1990s. And from that moment on, that staff was extremely depressed, was extremely negativist. He was the first thing that he told me, well, you choose a lousy work, you choose an inappropriate work, you will have no satisfaction in these activities. So the mentoring process in that period of time was not so well prepared. So if I have to follow his orders, most probably you will not see me right now in front of you, and I will choose another work. And this is the reason why we in Romania, we develop a different approach. And for example, because Cătălin speak about the Norwegian grants, in 2012, we developed an informal, a national program to organize mentoring programs. And that programs went well for 2 or 3 years. But then in 2015, in the second Norway grants mechanism, we developed a proper state-of-the-art mentoring and coaching program. We work in partnership with experts from Norway, and that document stays as the foundation of the programs, of the mentoring program that exist even right now in Romanian prison service. For all the other colleagues, you have the presentation in the slide in the Prezi format. I sent to my colleagues to Andrii also the PowerPoint presentation. Because we want to stay on time, I will kindly ask Mr. Doug Dredke to have a short 10 minutes input from his personal experience, not just as a practitioner, but also as a university teacher. Doug, if you hear me and if you have electricity in your hotel, please intervene.
Yeah. First of all, it's a great honor to spend a few minutes with you and with all the esteemed colleagues that have been a part of these presentations. So thank you, Dorin. I want to just very quickly recognize the importance of mentoring, as Dorin has spoken about. Serving as correctional staff, serving as a correctional officer, as a prison guard in our profession is very, very complex. It is not just about training correctional officers the rules, because in our environment, you have the complexity of dynamic security. You have the complexity of rehabilitation. You have the complexity of interpersonal skills and relationships. And So while our training academies and the training we provide is critically important, mentoring adds a additional layer to our training. It sends a number of important messages to our staff. The first is that we value them, that we are investing in them. And so we are taking our tenured and experienced correctional staff and assigning them the role of mentor. So it shows the new officers, the new staff, that we value them, but it also shows value of our seasoned officers, our experienced officers, that we want them to be a part of our organization, be a part of who we are in our mission. And so I think as we think about this, first of all, we have to be very careful about who we select for mentors. And Dorin has that in his slides in his presentation, because you want the staff that are asked to serve as mentors to also be committed to the agency, to the mission, and be loyal to the organization and to the leadership. The final thing that I would say is the training of your mentors. What do you want your mentors to be? And I had experience in my system when we instituted a mentoring program. It didn't work very well at first because we did not invest in training our mentors. And so mentoring can be an incredibly positive and powerful process to make your prison service more successful, but it also is a process that must take a lot of effort to provide the right training, to provide the oversight, to ensure that everyone understands their responsibilities. Dorin, that's my few comments. I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, and I look forward to listening.
Thank you, Doug, for your input. Because we are telling you about the Romanian experience in developing the mentoring programs, I will invite former Governor Ioan Batinas from the maximum security Gherla prison, who was in 2012 when we started the local and the national program on mentoring, but also who was a part in the programs that was developed with the support of the Norwegian grants. And if my colleagues from Ukraine are interested, I could share with you the coaching and mentoring manuals are in Romanian, but with Google Translate right now, you could make very easily work on it. So, Ioan, if you are here, please provide few inputs about how we organize, how it functions, what were the benefits. You are also one of the mentors in that program, so we are keen to hear your opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I must say to you warm greetings for Romania. Thank you very much for invitation. And I must say, it's mandatory to say, Dorin is beside other field of specialty into a prison service, is a pioneer. He create, he maintain, and he sustain this mentoring into the prison staff, preparing for become better. So, dear colleagues, today I will share with you a critical operational challenge we faced and the structured mentoring program that turned that crisis into an institutional success. The critical situation was within just 6 months during my mandate of the director of Gherla prison, Gherla maximum security prison. Our facility, sorry for my voices, I'm felt a little bit sick, but I must sustain this presentation. Our facility lost over 1/3 of its experienced staff due to mass retirements. Although we rigorously selected new recruits, they arrived with limited readiness for the demands of correctional work, especially in dealing with special categories of inmates. These new officers demonstrated low tolerance for stress, minimal discipline, poor availability for overtime work, and a weak desire for growth based on merit and sustained effort. All of this generated a major institutional risk, both operationally and in terms of public trust. Regarding measure taken and strategic interventions, together with my management team, we implemented targeted mentoring and professional counseling program to support and develop the incoming staff. We designed structured peer-to-peer mentoring activities, pairing new officers with seasoned professionals. We used feedback loops and continuous assessments to adjust the content and method of delivery. Through job shadowing, practical training, and ethical coaching, we ensure that recruits learn not only procedures, but and also values and standards. I must talk about, we reinforce this program with real-time supervision and corrective measures based on performance. About results and transformation observed, the mentoring program improved the operational discipline and staff behavior. Mentees evolved into professional ethical officers who actively contributed to institutional stability and incident prevention. The number of security incidents dropped and staff-inmate relation improved visibly. Some of the mentor staff became peer mentors themselves, contributing to a self-sustaining learning culture within the facility. Why I recommend mentoring in all correctional systems, and after that I will describe the program. Mentoring bridges the critical gap between theory and practice in correctional work. It humanizes institutional knowledge transfer, reinforcing professionalism and accountability. Most importantly, it transforms high-risk situations into opportunities for leadership, cohesion, and operational excellence. This is a chapter who I love very much. Why mentoring matters in correction, a profession like no other. Mentoring is not merely a training tool. It is a backbone of professional identity in a field that is as complex as it is demanding. Correctional work is not a routine job. It is a vocation that tests the strengths, ethics, and humanity of every individual who enters this profession. Correction is a unique profession because it involves daily exposure to high-risk environments. It requires balancing authority with empathy. Every day brings the new challenges. It is a profoundly human profession. It demands vocation, not just employment. In this context, mentoring becomes the bridge between experience and aspiration, between regulation and real-world application. It is how institutional values are kept alive, how professional standards are passed on, and how people grow from employees into custodians of justice, safety, and humanity. Mentoring honors the difficulty and the dignity of correctional work and ensures that those who embrace this noble path are never left to walk it alone. About a critical situation, like I said, I encountered a significant operational crisis when over 1/3 of our experienced personnel retired within approximately 6 months. Despite a rigorous selection process, new recruits lacked formal institutionalized correctional training, profoundly impacting facility operation and security. Some of specific incidents are arising very soon into the absence of structured training, were included security breaches, procedural errors, inadequate supervision, ineffective emergency response, misjudgments of inmate behavior, ethical and communication issues, administrative errors, complicity with inmates, introduction of forbidden materials, facilitation of unauthorized communication. What we do a mentoring program action plan with 6 big chapters. The first chapter is mentoring program design and planning, and I talk very short about every field just because it's a long material. Mentoring program designing and planning with the key action. The responsible was management team, and the key action was need assessment. We analyzed the need assessment, mentor identification and selection, development of mentoring guidelines, curriculum design, scheduling and resource allocation, stakeholders engagement, and program communication. All of these programs have 26 weeks for put it on the field, but this implementation timeline are 4 weeks. So the second chapter is mentor training and preparation. Is the responsible was the training department and senior mentors with the key actions mentor selection. It was very hard to select just because the senior have also retired, and we must choose not the seniors, but middle seniors, like I said. Mentor training workshops, role clarification, ethics and professional conduct, practical skill building, feedback and evaluation techniques, resource provision, ongoing support, and networking. Implementation timeline, 2 weeks. The third chapter is initiation and execution of mentoring activities with key action mentor and mentee pairing, structured mentoring session, job shadowing, very important, practical exercises and simulations, and documentation and progress tracking. Also, feedback and coaching and mentee support network. Started from the weeks number 7 to weeks number 24. This is a continuous program. Chapter 4, monitoring and evaluation with the key action, regular performance reviews, monthly progress evaluation, feedback integration, adjustment and corrective actions, reporting and documentation, quarterly comprehensive reviews and impact assessments. Number 5, control measures and feedback mechanism. Number 6, final evaluation and program adjustment. Let me tell you about the expected outcomes. Improved professional skills and ethical standards among staff. Enhanced institutional security and operational compliance. Reduce security incidents and improve staff-inmates relation. Establishment of a sustainable culture of continuous learning and professional development. Post-mentoring strategic action and institutionalization was institutionalization of mentoring as a core training component, creation of a permanent mentoring coordination unit, expansion and specialization of mentoring modules, implementation of a peer mentoring system, ongoing monitoring and evaluation, promotion of institutional learning culture. But we have some of them that we don't realize. So about unrealized action and limitation of the mentoring programs, insufficient personnel for full coverage, limited financial resources, operational disruptions, legislative and policy changes, resistance to cultural change, like Mr. Pedro said, the resistance of this culture, prison culture, I mean staff culture, they have a lot of pillars of resistance, lack of dedicated evaluation infrastructures. So, why mentoring for prison staff? Key conclusions: bridges the training gap, accelerate professional integration, strengthens operational security, foster ethical and professional behavior, improve staff retention and morale, encourage leadership development, contributes to organizational resilience, improve staff-inmate relation, and align with international best practices. Thank you very much. I finished my presentation and my voice is finished too. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our colleagues for a very well-rounded report. The first, my dissertation was devoted to the topic of the work with the penitentiary system personnel and our Ukrainian mentorship. I took it into account. I was doing my degree 20 years ago, and this is exactly that very example that I went through. And I'd like to, while our participants are still preparing their questions to our highly regarded audience, if I may, for those who is less experienced into the mentorship questions, I'd like to give a question to the old mentorship program, since you are the veteran of the system who tells what is the proper way to do that, what is not proper way to do that, and in comparison to the modern mentorship methods that have proven their results. How do you see the differences between them?
Well, if I may, we need to adapt all the time, and we need to adapt. For example, I will give you I will give an explanation. 2012, when we developed the mentoring programs, we are not aware of what it means, and we try to develop it only on our own. So we don't have the support of academic environment. We don't have the success, or we don't have the cooperation of a much more experimented prison system to learn from this. So it was something that was developed in-house, and it was, from my point of view, in that period of time, it was very empiric. We never take in consideration, and we make some mistakes in that period of time about the matching of the mentor and the mentees. So imagine that we have a very good professional prison governor, but that he was extremely introvert. So he was very good on making reports, but he was not very good on sharing his knowledge to his mentee. So in the next mechanism, when we start this professional approach on mentoring, we were taking in consideration also this aspect. But then, for example, we ignore, or we didn't take in consideration also a different aspect: the change of the styles of learning of our new generation. So when we start in 2015, 2016, the new mechanism of the new programs of mentoring, we have a very good procedure. But you know what? That procedure was developed for a type for the millennials, for the people that work in our force, in our system, but they were born in the 70s or in the 80s. And you know what? Those who enter in our workforce after the years 2000, after the year 2010, they like a different way of transmitting the information. If I stay all the time, they are appealing to technical solution, to applications. And this is how we learn in 2021, 2022, that, for example, there is an app which is called Mentee that basically provides support to this type of programs. So there is no solution to fit all. So if I have to give a recommendation, never stop learning, never stop assessing. At the end of each mentoring process, try to revise it, try to improve it, try to change it. You cannot function with a mentoring program developed in 2015, even if it was done with the support of the Norwegians, if you don't refine it each year at the end of each mentoring process. So this will be the advice. It's not a solution for a long time. It's for if you don't improve it, if you don't reassess it, and if you don't refine it each year.
Thank you. As I understand, that the answer to that question from Mr. Dorin. Do we, dear colleagues, have any more questions towards our speakers when it comes to mentorship? Yes, if I may, the question about the personnel and mentorship. When a person comes to you for a work and you train him or her, can you please tell with what speciality, with what background can a person come to you? Maybe a person has to have some kind of proper education to become the mentor program member. And another question is, do you have any kind of specific establishment where this kind of training occurs, or the certification of those people who already work in the system is done?
Yes. To respond to the first question, how we choose the mentor. We establish an ideal profile. So we used to say, for example, right now in Romania, in order to be a mentor, you need to have at least 5 years of service. You need to don't have a disciplinary record. So it means that in these 5 years, you need to behave well and to be recognized as a role model. Then you need to show a high level, a high capacity of emotional intelligence. So this is assessed via a role play test. Then the mentors, they are passing through a training curriculum. So the first module of the training curriculum for the mentors, it says listening without fixing. So why we do this? Because we want for the mentors to don't be the savior of the mentees. So we want for them to avoid this complex. Then we train our mentors to navigate across the power of dynamics. So because there will be situation when the mentor will need to provide advice to a person who has a higher rank. Then it's also important to train our mentor how to prevent his burnout, because it is important to keep him active from the point of view of the profession, and don't burn him during this process. So in order to do that, for example, we provide some career advancement credits. There is also an informal way to recognize in a public manner his activities. So even if we perceive him as a very good professional, and so he fit this profile of 5 years experience, no disciplinary records, before he starts the mentoring program, he is passing through this process. Then as activities, how we organize this mentoring program. We started basically with a face-to-face, with an online meeting. Then we have a site visit. So the mentee is coming to the mentor institution. So he's traveling, and for 1 or 2 or 3 days, it depends on the complexity of the program, he is staying, and he act as a shadow of the mentor. So he see what he's doing, he see how he interact with the staff, with the inmates, how he solve the challenges that he has to face. Then we replicate this in the mentee's institution. So in that case, he's observing the way of his activities, and then at each month there is a report, the report progress, which is prepared by the mentor, by the mentee, and is delivered to the prison administration in order to assess, to evaluate the mentoring program. This is right now in Romania. There is an internal procedure based on this, with rules of engagement for the mentor and for the mentees. So to respond to the first question, this is we have a mentoring profile, and then we deliver a training to the mentor in order to know how to do it, and then how the process is organized by that face-to-face, one-to-one meetings, but also online meetings.
Thank you, our dear colleagues who told us about mentorship. And for us, it is clear that our system is interesting and still good enough to be. What I mentioned is for the representatives of the Penitentiary Academy of Ukraine, that in the Romanian system, there are any kind of complexities because the practitioners did it without the conjunction with the representatives of academic circles. And I think that in Ukrainian, due to the fact that in Ukraine there is a Penitentiary Academy of Ukraine with a proper and smart approach, this can be a good advantage to implement this kind of systems to go together with the academic workers who can do the calculations and assessments. And for our academy, who is looking for more ways to be practical oriented and useful for practice backgrounds, for those departments who are dealing with pedagogical disciplines and those departments who are dealing with managing disciplines, this can be one of the live projects that then can take into their armory and to use in order not to be shy when they are asked, what did you do in the practical field? And thanks to our friend IOAN for these possibilities. Thank you so much. So we are moving on because, as I said, we are a little bit behind of our schedule. And now we would like to give the floor to another practitioner, the leader of the Estonian penitentiary system. And due to the leadership of the Mr. Rait KUUSE, we have a pretty sustainable cooperation. We learn a lot from them, and we are ready to cooperate force. And I would like to give the floor to you to tell about your achievements, challenges, and complexities. Please.
Thank you very much. First, I test the sound. Do you hear me? Okay, very good. So now I try to share my presentation as well, and let's see. So I hope that my presentation is also visible. Tell me if not. So thank you first of all for this opportunity to present the Estonian Prison and Probation Service at your seminar. The discussions so far have been very interesting ones, and I think that every topic we have today deserve at least half a day, if not more. But I try to be rather quick, and as we are in trouble with time, so please, if you have any questions, could you already write them into the chat box? So after I make my presentation, I will try to answer them when the next presenter is on. So first of all, I'm going to divide my short presentation into 5. I speak a little bit about our story, about our organization, strategy, outcomes, and also how the outcomes are measured, and do some summary here as well. Here we'll see that Estonia is in one corner of Europe, surrounded by good and not so good neighbors, as our Ukrainian colleagues know. But there we are, and this geographical location usually also dictates somewhat the developments of the country. So first of all, I would like to point out that we inherited in early 90s prison and also the probation system, which was rather Soviet model. And during the 50 years of occupation, everything what we started in 1920s till 1940s was of course demolished. So focus was on punishment, military style control, and this had to be challenged. So the challenge as such is not of building new prisons, which is also needed, but challenge is also to have new legislation, deal with all the issues in the society, and implement the European standards and human rights. So we have quite an experience how to change entire system, not only the criminal justice, but also entire country. So, well, from colonies to cells, the decision to build the first cell-type prison in Estonia was made in 1997 by our government. But why we needed the shift to cell based prisons is that it was seen as part of important part for battling Soviet legacies and upholding European prison rules. We need to re-establish the control over the prison environment to the state. That also led to the change how we train and work in the prisons. That also needed to be shift from discipline and re-education through labor to rehabilitation through individual sentence plans. And the main driver in Estonia in that regard at that time was that we wanted to be back in the European family again. And this driver was not only for the prison and probation service, but it was overwhelmingly visible in entire country. So here you can see the timeline, what we have done with the infrastructure. And when I'm talking about the infrastructure, I will talk later on as well that how we did change the working inside. You can see that the first purpose-built prison was opened in 2002, as the decision was made in 1997. The second Viru prison was opened in 2008. Tallinn prison, the last prison we built, and which is the mark of the end of the infrastructure reform, was opened at the end of 2018. And during that time, we continued to operate parallelly with the old facilities with rather Soviet-style design and equip them, of course, with new personnel, but the infrastructure set its limits. So now we have only 3 purpose-built prisons. Our prisons are multi-regime prisons with unit management style inside, so and rather big ones, as in a small country the resources are rather scarce, and we need to really think through very well how we manage the very difficult and complicated logistics inside the prisons. So one has to also mention that not only the prisons were focused, but also community sanctions and measures parallel to modernizing the prison work. And in 1998, we founded a new probation service, which was not existing before that. I myself started to work in that service as a probation officer since 1999, and know pretty well that how fast this part of our service has developed further. Later on, we merged probation and prison service because we saw a benefit in managing the sentence time together with prisons and probations. So now I can say that the probation service has become a cornerstone of the Estonian criminal justice system, managing a significant number of offenders in the community. And also it contributes to the public safety, and it is one very important part of the prison and probation service activities. Our systems are rather small, and compared to, for example, even the Romanian numbers, you might say that the Estonian system is tiny, but you have to remember as well that in Estonia we have only 1.3 million inhabitants. So that also kind of reflects to that the criminal justice systems are rather small compared to many other bigger countries as well. Average employee, of course, as usually we are dealing with the male clients, so then we need quite a lot of male workers as well. But nevertheless, the gender ratio is around 50-50. Mostly male guards are working due to the fact that we have mostly male prisons. And the college, where also the Ukrainian Penitentiary Academy has a very good collaboration and the project together till 2027 is main platform for teaching modern correctional skills and practices. So the strategy of the Prison and Probation Service is that we support the offenders returning to a law-abiding life. So this is not so much about what happens inside the walls, how well is the behavior there, but it's more about that what happens after we have finished our work. And our vision is that Estonia's recidivist rate is one of the lowest in Europe. I will come back to that with concrete figures. 4 objectives we have in our strategy that concerns everything from the functioning of the service till the satisfaction of our employees. And we measure our main indicators as well. First, we measure whether the public has trust towards us. Then we measure level of recidivism. We measure how many prisoners or probationers are employed, because employment is kind of, I would say, basic to law-abiding lifestyle. We also look at especially how many people pass probation successfully. We also look at the number of crimes and serious incidents in the prisons, because the environment itself is very challenging and it has to be secure. And we also look at employee satisfaction and commitment. So I will not be here, but this is one picture from our newest prison. So we have double cells as a rule. At the moment, it can be 1 or 2 persons per one cell. So all the prisons are purpose-built and rather new. Nothing luxurious, I would say, but very well controlled and manageable environment where we can work and implement our rehabilitation activities. Regarding physical conditions, I think that it's not too much said that according to the Council of Europe standards, we are meeting them all. Journey after serving a sentence is probably nothing very special in terms that the prison work and the phases of prison work are rather same in every country. The detail is in the perhaps in the parole and also in the methods you are employing during the sentence. We work based on the risk, need, and responsivity model. So we assess risks, we identify needs, and we provide treatment to manage those risks and meet those needs. Our risk assessment tool is in use in both parts of the service, in probation and in the prison, already for 2 decades. And this is originated from the UK's OASIS, which has been then through the scientific studies validated for Estonian use. And we are developing this constantly further. Every prisoner, every probationer has an individual plan to be followed, which foresees from the programs and interventions till employment. Reintegration into society, one part of it is to go through the social programs, which will teach you new thinking and behavior patterns. And you can see that during a year, the numbers, how many programs have been implemented, are quite significant. Estonia is particularly interesting country in that regard that today is the kind of new, we make a joke that the new low point of the prison service, because we have less than 1,600 prisoners. To be more precise, today it's 1,599 prisoners. And this is the lowest level ever Estonia has had in terms of the prisoners. We come from the history where we had 30 years ago 5,000 prisoners. So the aim of our criminal policy has been to reduce that number and to replace the penal policy or replace the imprisonment with all kinds of alternatives and preventive measures possible. And we have been very successful in that. Without any amnesty, or pardoning mass of convicts. So, and the same appears to be with the probationers. So the numbers or the figures have been dropped quite significantly. Also, the crime rate has dropped and the homicide rate in society has dropped. So Estonia has become, since 90s, very secure and boring country. We also measure as a strategic indicator how many people or how well is the open prison occupied. So open prison is, as in any other country, the place where prisoners go out to the normal employer for work on daily basis. And we keep them as occupied as we can in order really have better chances that the reoffending rates are dropping, because our data shows that when you have been released through open prison or through probation officers' attention, then your reoffending rates are significantly lower. Reoffending in Estonia is on average, so how we measure it that way, that 2 years after your release from prison or 2 years after the start of probation. So this is kind of our period when we measure. On average, the latest data is even lower. It is now, it's not published yet, but this year it will be published that on average it's 27%. So 27% of the prisoners who are released from the prisons will commit another crime, which is comparable to any Scandinavian state, and I think that it's quite good result. Of course, you have to look at how it has changed and what is inside this general number or figure. And first of all, there is a rule that if you serve a long prison sentence and you are released after serving it till the last hour without any supervision, then most likely your reoffending rates are higher. So this is here in the first part, that serving a sentence in prison, the reoffending rate is quite high. When you take, for example, other alternatives, or you take the release, for example, with electronic monitoring, then you can see that the figures are significantly lower. And this is part of our philosophy, I would even say the cornerstone, that we really foresee in Estonia the gradual release from the imprisonment, because it serves the public better. Nevertheless, of the fact that I also heard that that there was a question about the public perception. Nevertheless, of the fact that sometimes public is not in the opinion that the offender should be released through the probation period before the end of their sentence, it's still evidence-based that this gives us better results, and we have to strive to maximize this. Well, about the probationers, just very quickly, that around 81% of probationers pass probation period successfully. That means 19% have some issues and problems, but this percentage is something we are working on, and it's pretty obvious that those figures cannot be 100% or 0% because the path to us is quite troublesome and has already quite many problems in thinking and behavior. So we cannot really fix them. And whoever says that the prison or probation system should give 100% guarantee that the people are fixed after serving the sentence is not thinking very clearly. So I will summarize. We think that the Estonian way of changing the criminal policy and the prison and probation practices is among not few, but among very good success stories of the past decades, is that because we always had a clear political will and strategic vision, which is over the election periods. So we have been quite consistent in our drive to change the Estonian criminal policy towards Scandinavian way. We have modernized all of our infrastructure, invested quite a lot of funds, not only into the prison infrastructure, but also into the training of the staff and the development of the prison and probation staff. We also have strong emphasis on human rights and rehabilitation. Being a member of European countries, we do not have any chance to develop our practices further. And of course, we have used as much international cooperation and learning as we could, and we are still doing that. This gives quite big input into the development of any country's prison and probation services. Thank you very much, and if there are questions, I will try to answer them also in the chat.
Thank you, Mr. Rait. If I understand you correctly, we do not have any questions in the chat right now, so I will use this opportunity as a moderator to provide a small comment. You have mentioned it's interesting to compare in that part Estonia and Ukraine. You prepared very specific data, and I will just take like this, if I remember it correctly, the Estonian system from 5,000 moved to 1,600 inmates as of now. But you know what is interesting is that Ukrainian system in its full capacity had 220,000 and now 30,000. So in the part of decriminalization, the number of inmates is an interesting experience in Ukraine as well, but probably in the part of quality, we still have what to work with. By the way, if to talk about probation, you have mentioned that probation is also, you have a lower number of people who are on the probation. I do not know this statistics very well, but it seems to me that in probation, we do not have this huge decrease. This is this first opinion that I have up to your presentation. And the second, it's rather not an opinion, but a question already. For the last 2 years, it seems to me you have visited Ukraine 4 times, and you know it not worse than ourselves, than our average head of the prison. So if to talk about, take into account this audience that we have here today, and it's basically practitioners of a penitentiary system from medium level management and management of the prisoners and potential tomorrow officers of penitentiary system. So knowing Ukrainian experience, not Estonian, but Ukrainian experience, what would you give us as an advice?
Oh, that's $1 million question, I think you are asking from me. It's very difficult to give advice to another country because every country has to look at other experiences and then translate it into your local cultural and also bureaucratic context. But indeed, I have been visiting you quite a lot. So I hope that in the framework of the project we are having at the moment with you, you will find a lot of good things which you could incorporate into your training system of the staff. And I'm sure that we can provide our knowledge there. 2 comments perhaps I could make is that the first is that train your staff as much as possible. So this is the skills. Our work or our business is very skill heavy. So if the staff knows how to work, if the staff has the methodologies and the knowledge and the courage to use different approaches, then you will be successful. The other thing, what I noticed during our last visit a few weeks ago is that your cooperation between the probation and the prison might not be always very tight. And perhaps there is something to work with, like to really to work with the preparation of the release and supervision and assistance after the release from the imprisonment. So that perhaps is something which we, at least in Estonia, experienced that is very beneficial in order to really reduce the risks for the society in terms of the criminal behavior.
Thank you, Mr. Rait. Really very relevant advice and very relevant observation as well. It's just the only thing that we need to do is to start working and change. We want to do this and we will try to do this. Thank you for your support in that. If you don't mind, we will keep on moving. And now I would like to give the floor on the topic on right to legal aid for detainees, legal and policy implications by Hugues, SUREMAIN, a representative of EPLN, who visits Ukraine pretty often. I have even had several friendly discussions with him, and I hope that Mr. Hugh will give us some new information in the part of rights of detainees.
Thank you very much, Andrei. Thank you for this invitation. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak today, and I'm delighted to be able to continue the dialogue we have been engaged in with the KVS since several years already. And I've been asked by Andrei to present one of the main areas of intervention of our network, which brings together NGOs, research centers, university of 20 countries of the Council of Europe. So I thought in this perspective, it would be useful to share and to present the work we are doing in the area of one of the most fundamental rights, but yet overlooked rights behind prison walls. And here I'm talking about the right of prisoners, especially those in pretrial detention, to access justice. I'm referring here to the access of justice as a guarantee of the exercise of fundamental rights within the prison. As a matter of fact, we have conducted joint research with the French National Scientific Agency with the involvement of 5 universities, involving comparative research and analysis on empirical studies in 9 countries of the European Union, namely France, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, Spain, Poland, Czech Republic, and Bulgaria. So this research followed on from a previous work we did in 10 EU countries on the impact of the case law of the European Court when it comes to the effectivity of remedies. And that concluded that while the recognition of the rights behind bars has progressed considerably over the last 20 years, these efforts, meaning in the case law of the European Court, these efforts were undermined by the difficulties faced by detainees in bringing their cases in court. And to determine the reasons for this phenomenon, this research has brought forward an in-depth assessment of national situation regarding access to legal assistance for remand prisoners and how these issues were addressed by European law. And I must say that this research is currently being extended to 3 countries, Ukraine, Portugal, and Greece. And when it comes to Ukraine, the work is being led by Zmina, and more specifically by Marina Demura, with the involvement of Dmitro Yagunov as a reviewer, both of whom spoke today during this conference. And my point here is not to speak about on their behalf on the current work which is conducted and which is still conducted. But I will mention the lesson learned during the first phase of this work in 9 countries of the EU and the follow-up we're striving to give it from a standard setting perspective. So our work reveals 6 major challenges that form what we may call a cumulative exclusion from justice. First of all, prisoners face structural disabilities in accessing justice. I think all of us are aware of this. I'm referring to deep-rooted socioeconomic vulnerabilities. Most prisoners enter detention with little economic, social, or educational capital. Many struggle to read or write. Many fear reprisals if they file complaint. And what is also important is that when it comes to spiritual detainees, they are reluctant to pursue justice, being worrying it might harm their main legal case, meaning the criminal cases which is conducted against them. And in short, the prison environment silences precisely those who need justice the most. Second, the European legal framework often fails to acknowledge this vulnerability. And the European Court has produced highly valuable case law on prisoners' rights, of course, but paradoxically, it promotes simplified remedies that assume prisoners can act alone without legal representation. And in reality, this vision weakens protections by overlooking the critical role played by lawyers. As we know, the sixth EU Procedural Rights Directive address fair trial standards, but don't address the issue of prisoners and the rights within the prisons, with the exception of what concern the implementation of the European arrest warrant. So the third lesson is that access to legal information is very poor. I'm talking about the access of to legal standards. And of course, the law cannot protect those who cannot find it. In most countries, legal information is reduced to brief brochure. Key texts, especially case law from the European Court, are virtually absent. And lower level regulations, such as circulars, govern daily prisons, but are neither transparent nor published. One common feature is that regulations are not updated, and the prison authority use frequently bylaws that are not accessible to prisoners. And even legal professionals struggle in accessing them. The result of this is that the fog of legal invisibility strips prisoners of the ability to know and let alone assert their rights. So the fourth lessons learned is why the right to legal aid is broadly recognized in all the jurisdictions that we analyzed. Protection is patchy and under-resourced. And within the EU, systems vary greatly, but a common feature is that lawyers acting under the legal aid scheme are underpaid, overburdened, and often discouraged from engaging in prison litigation. Payment delays and poor remuneration make it nearly impossible to build a sustainable legal practice in this field. And yet, where legal aid schemes are structured and supported, we see something powerful emerging, a growing body of prison law, stronger bar association involvement, and greater legal awareness inside prison. And lawyers being the advocates for the protection of prisoners' rights and fueling public debate with rational that is fueled with the knowledge of the prison system inside itself. The fifth lesson learned is that the legal profession is under-engaged. And here I'm talking about mainly bars association. Lawyers are essential, especially from the first moment of custody, but yet prison law is not a core issue for most of the bar we analyzed in the frame of our research. Those who work, and the conclusion, the result of this is that those who work in this area often do so through informal network or from an activist perspective, not because the systems enable or encourage them. And their economic insecurity only compounds the isolation of their work. As a human rights defender, we depend on the goodwill of a few rather than the structure of our institutions. The last lesson is that non-state actors, particularly NGOs and law clinics, play a critical but precarious role. They compensate for the state failings, often without funding, recognition, or secure access. States are reluctant to fund litigation against themselves, so the result of this is that NGOs are very dependent on international support or the support from the community. And despite the vital role they play in enforcing the convention rights, they are not treated as true partner in the justice system. So these six problems form a system in which the exercise of rights is often theoretical but rarely practical. But we also see what's possible. We see that when access to legal information is provided, when lawyers are supported, when NGOs are supported as well, we see that prisoners can assert their rights and that the rule of law reach even behind bars, and some shortcomings, systemic shortcomings, may be corrected. So what must be done? We believe that we need a committed and multi-level policy, and we believe that the EU level is a kind of essential here. Also, there is a debate about the competence of the EU law to regulate this matter, which is often seen as falling within the exclusive competences of member states. We know that systemic difficulties in prison system are a growing obstacle to cooperation in criminal matters between member states, and demonstrating the need for EU law to intervene. And there's a more and more recognition of this from the part of the EU institutions. And we have been engaged in a dialogue with the EU institutions, mainly the Parliament and the Commission. We organized several. We've been part in several joint discussions, but unfortunately, the pandemic has significantly slowed down this momentum. And on our side, our involvement in documenting the war crimes committed by Russia in penitentiary under occupation took a lot of our energy, since we decided to focus on the first years of the full-scale invasion, our activity in this area. Nevertheless, our work had fed into the European Commission's action, which adopted a recommendation on the topic in December 2022. Here I'm referring to the recommendation of the Commission 2023/681 of 8 December 2022 on procedural rights of suspects and accused persons subject to pretrial detention and on material conditions of detention. So according to this recommendation, member states should ensure that all detainees are clearly informed of the rules applicable in the place of detention, have effective access to a procedure allowing them to officially challenge the condition of the detention, and that their complaints are handled promptly and diligently by an independent authority or tribunal empowered to order remedial measures, particularly to put an end to any violation of the rights not to be subject to torture or inhumane or degrading treatment. The recommendation also provides measures to ensure that foreign nationals in detention have access to legal information. And now we're at a stage where the Commission must monitor and evaluate the measures taken by the member states and submit a report to the European Parliament and the Council by the end of this year or at the beginning of next year. And we will, of course, follow this initiative closely and work to ensure that it results in legislations with specific and binding requirements on member states. And in this respect, we pretty much saw the added value, and it will be my conclusive remark, the very impact of having legislation of the EU not duplicating, but defining precisely the right enshrined in the Convention of the European Court and supported by the case law of the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, when we analyze the situation with the right of accused person in a criminal matter. It's even if there are still some issues in several countries, I think one can see the major improvements that those directives, the 6th directive on procedural rights of accused person, brought in practice. So we're trying to convince the member states, we try to convince the EU institutions to move forward on this. And again, the next step in this perspective for us is to provide insights on the analysis on the situation of those 3 countries, meaning again, Greece, Portugal, and Ukraine. And I think, and I'm sure that our colleagues from ZMINA will be able to shortly present the results of this work and express of recommendations in this area. Thank you very much.
Дякую, пане Деширемен. Ви поділились цікавою інформацією.
Very much thank you to you. Thanks for sharing your information that in the penitentiary system of Ukraine, there is one of that question one should never stop working upon. And that's exactly that very question that has problems. And we will have these problems until we, on one side, realize these problems, and on the other side, until we stop working upon this, because there is still lots of places for maneuvering, and there is still places for improvement. I assume that we might have any kind of questions, and dear colleagues, if you have them, please raise your hand or write them all down in the chat, and in a moderational way, I will make my moderational comment, if you don't mind. In the Penitentiary Academy of Ukraine, we are interested to be sustainable partners with, in terms of informational exchanges with those communities you and us are engaged into. And having heard this, please, if you have a possibility to recall and not to forget to invite for this kind of events, where the stages of Ukrainian Penitentiary Academy will be. On my side, I can tell you that if you might have any kind of request for any kind of research or initiatives in terms of convicts, the conditions of their being in the prisons, and you are lacking the resources to fulfill all this, then the research center of the Penitentiary Academy can be a partner, simply address to us this issue, and it is pretty simple here. Just address this problem to me, and then we will try to help you as much as we can, because to do this kind of research, one has to master proper standards that you can expect. On the third side, I'd like to say that, well, you know, whether you know or do not know, I assume that you might not know that about this kind of initiatives of the Penitentiary Academy, such as enlightenment work on convicts and juvenile convicts that the Judicial Clinic of Penitentiary Academy of Ukraine is doing right now, and in different establishments of the incarceration, to make sure that the convicts know about their rights, and to make sure that Ukrainian convicts have this possibility to resort for legal aid and to receive it. And currently we already have agreements, and I think that you all have heard about para-lawyers network of the Horizon organization, who have representatives in a bunch of Ukrainian cities. And right now we are working through a mechanism to ensure that there are social workers who are less competent than the workers of the academy and even students and the cadets of the Judicial Institute of the Academy to be able to engage, to have this judicial aid for those convicts through these para-lawyers of Horizon organization. So for you, for people who are interested in what is going on in Ukraine with the rights of the convicts, that's going to be an additional complementing information. Now, so I do not see any more questions coming into the chat. And again, if you have any, please write them all down. And if you want to address a question, any questions right now, please do that. And I simply for you to understand, we are already working for the 3rd hour in a row. So I get it that it is hard and complicated to address any kind of questions. So this way or another, Mr. Hugh, very much thankful for your report. I was happy to listen to your concerns and opinions about the field of work in which you work. And I'd like to give the floor to Mikko Sarvela, with who we are in a pretty good coordination in terms of when it comes to International Committee on the Red Cross of Ukraine, when it comes to convicts. And I think that Mikko will be able to tell about his mission in the Red Cross Committee. But if you have a possibility to tell a couple of words about Ukrainian prisons, we also will be happy to listen to you.
Thank you. Oops. Okay, now it should work. I hope you see my first screen there. Thank you, Andrii. I will go to the information sharing a bit later under the confidentiality slide that I have here, so we can continue with that. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to tell you about ICRC and what is ICRC doing in Ukraine and what are we doing globally. So to start with, I think it's very important to highlight first that ICRC works only in the places where an armed conflict or other situation of violence takes place. So, and the reasons of our presence there is very clear and could be described by our exclusively humanitarian mission statement, which is to do everything we can do to ensure that the parties to the conflict protect the lives and dignity of victims of this armed conflict and or other situations of violence, and to provide them with assistance. So all the principles of our work are based on our mission statement, as well as our activities in conflict zones. So first of all, we are assisting people with their basic humanitarian needs, food, water, we are providing construction materials, etc. We are also ensuring respect for the international humanitarian law by, for example, providing special seminars and trainings for military, police forces, but also to the prison staff who are working, for example, with prisoners of war. So the very important part of our work is visiting people in detention. So we could say that this is something that distinguishes the ICRC from other organizations around the world. And sometimes this is connected with our activities of restoring family links. However, missing people are not always related with detention. Sometimes there's no possibilities to find people alive. So in this case, we care for the dead and we inform people about their dead relatives and loved ones. So we are helping people living in conflict zone, not only with food and water, but with strengthening health facilities in the area of their habitat. We are also informing them about mine risks. And finally, we are working in cooperation with the National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, here the Ukrainian URCS, and strengthening their capacities. Some very basic things about ICRC in a nutshell. So we are neutral, impartial, independent, humanitarian organization founded in 1863. So this is when Henri Dunant witnessed the Solferino battle between French and Austrian armies. which left a very strong impression on him. And after the battle, he organized local people to help wounded soldiers without paying any attention for their nationality, for example. So such principles later became a base work of the ICRC. And additional tasks and activities were added with time. And the ICRC was at the heart of creating the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. So our work is based on 4 Geneva Conventions. And the first Geneva Convention was adopted in 1964. And this established humane rules of war. The second Geneva Convention for the condition of wounded, sick, and shipwrecked members of armed forces at sea. The third Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, and this was based on the results of the World War I. And finally, the fourth Geneva Convention is related to the protection of civilian persons in time of war and was adopted in 1949 as a result of the World War II. So all these conventions were revised that year, the previous conventions, and since 1949, all states have signed these conventions. So the state parties, the signatories to these 4 Geneva Conventions of 1949 and the additional protocols of 77 and 2005 have given the ICRC a mandate to protect victims of international and internal armed conflicts. So such victims include war wounded, prisoners of war, refugees, civilians, and other non-combatants. So the Geneva Conventions and the additional protocols are at the core of international humanitarian law. The body of international law that regulates the conduct of armed conflict and seeks to limit its effects. So, like I mentioned, they specifically protect people who are not taking part in the hostilities, for example, civilians, health workers, and aid workers, and those who are no longer participating in the hostilities, such as wounded, sick, shipwrecked soldiers, and prisoners of war. In 2024, we had around 17,000 staff in over 100 countries, helping people affected by armed conflict and violence. So we are very global organization. What do we do in Ukraine? So our presence was established in 1995 by the Verkhovna Rada, and the ICRC delegation was established in '96. So we closed our activities partially in 2011 and reopened our delegation here in 2014. And we have a diplomatic mission status accredited by the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Since 2014 in Ukraine, we have been supporting people with assistance, food, water, other essential items. We have also been very actively supporting hospitals, primary healthcare facilities, and repaired water station, supported household rehabilitations, etc. And throughout this time, we have visited people detained and registered people who are missing due to the conflict. In 24, We had close to 900 staff working on response. This includes resident staff members and international staff. So what do we actually do when we visit places of detention? This is a global approach. This is not about Ukraine. We have the same visit modalities all around the world. So we want to have we have the right to have access to full and unimpeded access to all places of detention and all detainees covered by the Geneva Conventions or an access agreement. And when we are talking about Geneva Convention, we are talking about prisoners of war. Also, according to Geneva Convention, we have access to each of these places, full and unimpeded access to all the premises used by and for the detainees. Again, the ICRC has the right to conduct private interviews with prisoners of war selected by our delegates. We also have a right to revisit as often as necessary and to be provided by the list of the prisoners of war who are in the place of detention to basically for the ICRC to register them and to have such a list from the detaining authority. So this is very much in a very nutshell how our visit modalities go when we are talking our visits under the Geneva Convention 3, visiting prisoners of war. In practice, what is the standard procedure of our visit? We first have a meeting with the director usually and his or her team in each place of detention. We introduce the management of ICRC if they already don't know us. We talk about our plan of the visit, how do we do these visits, and we also talk about the confidentiality, which is one of the core let's say core things of ICRC, how we do our cooperation, how our work with the detaining authority. So when we visit, the authority can be assured that we don't publish anything, any information when it comes to our visits. All the information we get, we share with the detaining authority, here at the DECP. We don't publicly announce our findings. We don't have internet page where we put our reports. We confidentially discuss these with the detaining authority and share our opinions, hear their opinions, and share our recommendations. So basically also during this presentation, I can talk about what we do, but I'm not talking about what we see during these visits, because this is something that we keep between us and the detaining authority. We also, during this first meeting of the management, we ask, are there any support requests or assistance requests from their side to us that we could look into? I already mentioned we ask for the list of the POWs that are in the facility or the detainees who are in the facility and compare it to our list, what we have. We also inquire about transfers, releases, and deaths in custody. The next step is we do a complete tour of the facilities. We also do private interviews with the registration of these detainees. So it's basically interviews without witnesses, as we call them. So the detaining authority is not present and hearing what's being discussed during these interviews. So I already mentioned about the list of detainees and the details of the prisoners of war who are in custody, for example, and the personal details of specific detainees we might intend to follow up individually. After this, well, the visits usually can take it can take a one week, for example. It can take 2 weeks if there are a lot of, for example, prisoners of war in the facility, because we want to conduct interviews, private interviews of people who want to talk with us. So this final meeting, we are meeting with the authorities again in charge of the place of detention. We discuss about our findings. We also combine it with our recommendations if we see that conditions of detention are or internment are somewhat challenged. So we give our recommendations also, and we hear the views of the detaining authority. So it's a discussion. We are not doing investigations. We are not doing inspections. We are having a dialogue with the authority. This is a very important point when it comes to ICRC's role. We do multidisciplinary visits. We have a detention delegate, who is of course the person who is doing the interviews, who is leading the visits. So detention delegates they might be specialized in detention. They are the core personnel of the visit. Then we have support functions. We might have a detention doctor or a nurse with us. In some conditions, we might have a nutritionist with us. For example, in Ukraine, we have quite a lot of technical visits by the water and habitat engineers. Prison system advisor like me is joining occasionally to these visits. And of course, we have interpreters who are also international staff. So it's a very multidisciplinary approach, systemic approach. We are looking for the core reasons of issues and problems that might be present in the place of detention. So the actual objectives of these visits, why are we doing this? So we are supporting the authorities' efforts to secure the conditions of detention, both physical and mental well-being. We aim to improve human treatment and conditions of detention for those who are deprived of their liberty, regardless of the reason for their arrest and detention. And we are also supporting the respect of fundamental judicial guarantees. And I already mentioned the cooperation with the authorities through confidential and transparent dialogue. So what is detention in international armed conflict, IAC, like here in Ukraine? So here we are talking that ICRC is mandated under the 3rd and 4th Geneva Convention, as well as customary international law. And under this international humanitarian law, IHL, certain categories of persons interned may be afforded special protection, including prisoners of war, POWs, and also civilian internees. So it's a very clear difference when it comes to internment of prisoners of war and imprisonment of convicted detainees. So POWs are primarily combatants who are interned to prevent them from participating in hostilities. So this is basically the reason of their internment. So they are being it's a preventive measure to avoid that these enemy combatants rejoin the fighting. So this is the purpose of internment. Other, like, of course, detention, if we talk about that, that's a punitive measure of the crime committed, prevention of future crimes, maintaining public order, and basically ensuring that justice is taking place. So the ICRC aims to secure humane treatment and decent conditions of internment and detention for all those held in relation to an armed conflict, as required under IHL. In addition, our priorities are to prevent torture and other forms of ill treatment, and to prevent and resolve people going missing. We also work to ensure the detaining authorities respect legal safeguards. So to alleviate the suffering of protected persons and their families, the ICRC also restores and maintains contact between those being held and their relatives. So basically restoring family links. I'm not going through this table very much in detail, definitely not. So I already mentioned the main purpose of internment. So it's preventative. So, and during this internment, the prisoners of war benefit from a very detailed regime of rights and protection spelled out, most notably in the Third Geneva Convention. And these are global, again, I'm talking globally when I'm talking Geneva Convention. So this is not only about Ukraine, this applies, Geneva Convention applies global. So for the purposes of this detention, the internment, the most important consequence of combatant status is the privilege of combatants, which affords the combatants the right to participate directly in hostilities on behalf of a party to an international armed conflict. So this means that combatants, as a legitimate representatives of the belligerent parties, enjoy immunity from prosecution for lawful acts of war. So that is to say, for hostile acts carried out in conformity with IHL. At the same time, combatants also have a duty to respect IHL. They do not enjoy immunity from prosecution for violations of IHL that are basically punishable as a matter of international criminal law or under national law of the capturing state. So Geneva Convention has a lot of articles about conditions of detention. It talks a lot about hygiene, quarters, well, dormitories of the POWs, food, clothing is discussed, recreational intellectual activities. It talks about discipline, also disciplinary measures, what can be applied to the POWs. Talks about correspondence and parcels, and also about criminal judicial proceedings. And the commentary on 2020 on Geneva Convention 3, it shows it's a bit more updated version that gives also possibility for, well, the original Geneva Convention talks about, for example, sending telegrams. I'm not talking about the app now. I'm talking actual telegrams. So the commentary section is given more towards a future vision that we can also use technological means in for example, in the correspondence of prisoners of war. Very shortly about what kind of examples when we are talking about, when Geneva Convention is talking about internment, and it talks about basic needs and purchases, it talks about personal belongings, for example. So these are just examples. But prisoners of war are protected by this framework that basically emphasizes dignity and autonomy. So the prisoners of war can keep personal items, buy what they need, engage in education and religion, and they must have a voice through representation in the camps. Personal belongings, Article 18. So it describes very in detail that the POW should, for example, retain their identity documents and personal items. And why? Because these items are essential to their identity, dignity, and survival, especially if there are like air raids and etc., which can put them in risk. Basic needs and purchases. So Geneva Convention Article 28 talks about possibility or to purchase additional foodstuff, soap, tobacco, and similar items at local market prices with their financial means. So allowing prisoners of war to buy food, soap, or tobacco, it's not a luxury, it's about preserving human dignity and autonomy. And very shortly, intellectual and recreational activities. We all know that boredom and inactivity in prisons, in camps, in custody, it's usually corrosive. So, and educational and recreational activities are essential for mental health and social cohesion. So these activities also provide structure and purpose and help prisoners of war to retain their humanity and avoid despair during this sometimes indefinite captivity. So why is it indefinitive? Because the Geneva Convention talks that the prisoners of war should be released immediately after the hostilities end. Again, this is a difference when we compare imprisonment, where you have clear indication of how long is your sentence, this is your release date, these are the conditional release dates, etc. But Geneva Convention, when we are talking internment, it's different. And of course, states can agree for exchanges, but the actual Geneva Convention talks about release immediately upon when the hostilities end. Conclusion when it comes to these provisions. So they serve a bigger purpose. Again, ensuring that internment is not a punishment, but a protective measure. So they create a humane environment, reduce the risk of unrest, and uphold the very rules that separate lawful internment from arbitrary detention. Again, I'm going to recap here some core principles when we are talking detention on operations of prisoners of war, internment. It's very similar, humane treatment. All detainees must be treated humanely at all times. Torture is prohibited in any circumstances. Must be held in conditions that safeguard the health and dignity. What differs is, for example, the last part here, principle of non-refoulement. So, according to Geneva Convention, detainees, prisoners of war, may not be transferred to another authority if there is a substantial risk that their fundamental rights will be violated. So these are some of the differences when it comes to imprisonment, internment, and what ICRC is working when it comes to Ukraine and other contexts of armed conflict. And I am certain Andrii is happy if I close now. And thank you very much for your attention. And I'm trying to stop share and return back to the...
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mikko. You made a stop at a very interesting point, by the way. And if I may, I will not let you go without a question asked.
I know.
Since we invited you for a discussion, but I will ask you briefly. I will not be asking whether Ukraine is disobeying the standards that have to do with the keeping the POWs. But I will ask you this: what are the most important, from your point of view, rights? What are the most important rights of the POWs in Ukrainian penitentiary system?
Well, I can start from the question you didn't want to ask me. So I can tell that Ukraine is very much doing its best to follow Geneva Convention 3. What I can say. When it comes to your other question, I think the most important thing, we have had a lot of discussions, Andrii, also in person about this, humane treatment, and to distinguish the difference between imprisonment and internment. And I think this is something we are working together on, as I had a little part in my presentation, and to have the understanding to the penitentiary staff that they are working in a completely different context when they are working with prisoners of war. And me as a former prison director, I also had a bit of a learning curve joining ICRC Ukraine, when I had to learn a completely new context, this Geneva Convention 3, which is a completely different set of rules what I have used to work with. When we are talking Mandela rules, we are talking European prison rules, Bangkok rules, etc. But under this context, we are applying Geneva Convention 3, and the mindset, we are also always saying that the prisons are like, and prison departments, governmental agencies are like big ships that turn very slowly. But once we are talking POWs, let's say how quickly the prison department had to put this in place in Ukraine, this system of prisoners of war. I'm quite still amazed how quickly, for example, the Decree 413 came into force that gives national legislation on prisoners of war. So I hope this gives somewhat an answer to your question. Thank you.
Дякую, Mikko.
Right. Thank you, Mikko. Answer to those who is deeply into the topic, and for those who is not, you should study this topic more in details. But this way or another, we will still have lots of events ahead, and we will have the classes from you, from your colleagues, from International Red Cross with us. And if you want us not to disobey something, we should know about that. And if we want not to disobey something, we should directly talk about this, because Ukrainians are that people who love to hear direct advices and then the direct tasks from the leaders with a question like, is it clear? And we love to answer this question. Do we love to do? Okay, this way or another, but thanks to Mr. Mikko for very well-rounded report. I have to use this kind of right for torture during these conferences, because this very torture is going to be another need to listen to my presentation. I would not like to talk about it much, but for those people who are pedants, who are attentively and have been listening to the work of the whole section, and if there is somebody who still wants to hear about solitary confinement in Ukraine, I will try to be as brief as possible in my report. When we were preparing last year for the international event regarding the solitary confinement in Strasbourg, we have analyzed the Ukrainian experience and Ukrainian conclusions about that. And the materials of my presentation that was done at the September 2024, we made the statistics by the time, but after coming back to Ukrainian and enlargement of our skills, I worked with those comments, and all in all, this material is already in our system. And since I do not belong to that team that makes any kind of impact on this, I can say that it is well known, and I hope that upon those changes, there are people working to implement them. But I would like to jump on this opportunity and to use this conference to ensure that in the Department of the Criminal Punishment, we did not understand clearly by the end of 2024 to broadcast this all on a more wider scale upon our system and among the teachers of the Penitentiary Academy and perhaps those stakeholders who are looking forward. And now let's take a look at a little bit of the statistics that by that time, and these numbers are approximately covering 40,000 convicts in Ukraine. And among them, in solitary confinement, for the 9 months of the last year, we had 119 cases and corresponding to 21 cases done because of the reasons of individual reasons of keeping them in the solitary confinement in detention centers in Ukraine on different reasons. All in all, solitary confinement, as such, mentioned de facto when it comes to personal protection, but they have to be used with some proper peculiarities. And to this type, we also belong. I will not be telling the numbers since this is more internal information. The leaders of the criminal organizations who we also have are keeping in confinement, solitary confinement. It's not about their personal protection, but it's about their isolation as well for the other people. And here my comment will be as following. It's not that there are big disobeying in Ukrainian practices, but there are some kind of recommendations in terms of how to implement this and fulfill this. Perhaps those people who are in solitary confinement, even because of their personal protection, or those criminal leaders have to recall and remember about the consequences of their solitary confinement and to do additional measures to ensure that they have a possibility to keep the contacts with their positive impacting family members on them, to receive psychological assistance on them, and while using those psychological methods that we have in our availability. For example, the walk time, increasing the walk time. Next one has to do with the solitary confinement as a disciplinary punishment. And over here you can see the statistics, and then in the detention centers of the criminal punishment, it can be the keeping of disciplinary isolators. And over here we have a pretty controversial practice that, to my mind, disobeys the rights of people and humans. Is that detention centers, not in the prisons, not in the remand prisons, is that the leaders do not understand that keeping in the isolator in solitary confinement just because they are empty relies negative consequences of the solitary confinement. With the very little exceptions, in those disciplinary isolators, we don't have to keep them alone, but to keep them with another inmate. In case, say, if two of them made a fight, it is not possible, it is not okay to keep them together. The ways out of this is first to know about the problems of the solitary confinement that has been having its mark on the psychology of these convicts, and secondly to offer the social events for these convicts, and thirdly not to forget, so to say, what's called quasi-free period liberation, because during the solitary confinement they behave well. And while me being in the detention centers, when I saw that these people who are in the disciplinary isolating cells already recognize their behavior, sit there okay, and do not have any problems with their behavior, so there is no point to keep them there up to 10 days period, and I do not always understand it.
Очі, які показують теж нерозуміння того, що можна ж дійсно звільнити раніше за
Because it's, if the person behaves well, you can indeed take him or her out of the solitary confinement. But here we have to understand that one has to do some kind of additionals in terms of walks. In those disciplinary remand prisons, there is separate walking yards. In Ukraine, at some point, the administration is working as a pedant who just follows the norms of the legislation, 1 hour for walks a day. As for me, that's a continuation of that punishment practice that is still there in the heads of our workers. So what kind of pity will there be if somebody who is sitting in this kind of disciplinary isolator, if he or she has a possibility to walk around more, there will be less problems, less consequences, and less talks with ombudsman and other entities who pay visits to us. Next one, I will briefly tell about medical traits. And there is a pretty controversial practices here to keep in the convicts who, because of the medical scenes, are unstable. By the way, well, yeah, what you can see on the slide is a little bit different. Over here, the situation is that we have in the small investigation isolators. There is remand prisons. So juvenile women or juvenile women with children, there can be a situation when there is 1 person per each room in the remand prisons. Right now, we're trying to combat this problem. That first of all, we do not understand that this is the 1-person room, and secondly is that we are trying to do the whole bunch of positive social events. Truth be told, it's not good enough. And when there is a small remand prison that is located one not far from each other, then unfortunately we haven't reached in our system that approach when, in order not to have the problems what we wrote in our last report, so that 1 juvenile woman in, say, Lutsk, and in order not to combine them together, let them all sealed together in 1 cell, and there will be no problems with confinement. This one will tell us medical traits, and the transgenders yet do have a little. Truth be told, we them in the regime mode. We have designed that and address what is a position of security. They and other terms, we to pay, and not even the proper solution funds to talk about this.